People think the hardest part of building a fortune is the grind, the endless hours, the sleepless nights, the meetings, the failures. But they're wrong. The hardest part is waking up with no memory, no movement, and no clue how you got there. My name is Elias Rowe. At least, that's what they told me. I didn't recognize the name when I first heard it. The sterile white ceiling above me stared blankly as a voice whispered, "You're safe now, Elias. You're in the hospital." Safe. That word didn't feel like it belonged to me. Safe is for people with ordinary lives. Mine had been anything but. I lay in that hospital bed for months, paralyzed, trapped inside a body that wouldn't respond. They called it a medically induced coma at first, necessary after the accident. But somewhere along the way, I slipped deeper. They weren't sure I'd come back, but one person believed I would. Her name was Celia, a nurse with gentle hands and tired eyes. Celia became the only constant in my blurred reality. Every evening, after her shift should have ended, she'd sit by my bed and talk. Not like the others, who spoke to me like I was some medical file. No, Celia spoke to me like I was human, like I mattered. She told me about her day, her patients, her dreams of opening a small community clinic one day. She even talked about her father, who had passed away after they couldn't afford treatment. That's why she became a nurse, to save others the way no one could save him. One night, after the ward had gone quiet, she leaned closer. Her fingers brushed mine and she whispered, "I don't know if you can hear me, Elias, but I feel like I've come to know you through your silence. I hope you wake up someday, because I think I've fallen in love with you." I remember the ache in my chest, not physical pain, but something deeper, something ancient. Love, hope, desperation. I couldn't speak, couldn't open my eyes. But inside, something began to stir. That night, I remembered everything: the car crash, the negotiation in Zurich, the betrayal by the one person I trusted most, my former partner, Darren Shaw. Darren and I had built Rotech from scratch. Two college dropouts with fire in our guts and nothing to lose. I was the builder, the strategist. He was the face, the charmer. Together, we turned a broken idea into a billion-dollar AI firm. But success changes people. Or maybe it just reveals who they've always been. The night before my accident, Darren had confronted me about selling my shares. I had refused. I believed in what we'd built. I wanted to expand into humanitarian tech, applications that could change healthcare, farming, education. He laughed, said I was going soft. The next morning, my car careened off a bridge. The investigation ruled it an accident. But I knew Darren. He never liked to lose. As the memories rushed back, something else ignited. Resolve. I had to get out of that bed. I had to reclaim my life. Not just for me, but for the quiet voice who believed in me when I was nothing more than a body in a bed. The first time my finger twitched, no one noticed. Celia had just left for the evening. I focused harder than I ever had during a boardroom negotiation, willing my right index finger to move again. For weeks, I repeated that invisible exercise. Muscle by muscle, nerve by nerve. Bit by bit, I clawed my way out of the fog. I didn't press the nurse call button when I first gained control of my hand. I waited, observed. I needed time to think, time to plan. I still didn't know who I could trust. Darren thought I was out of the picture. If he learned I was awake, he might try to finish what he started. So I stayed silent. But I listened to everything. The staff assumed I couldn't understand. That was their mistake. I absorbed every conversation, every shift rotation, every headline that played on the waiting room television. Rotech was going public. Darren had taken the company in a wildly different direction. cutting the humanitarian divisions I'd begun developing in secret. He had erased my legacy. One morning, while the room bathed in golden light, I whispered, "Water." It came out, like gravel, low and strained, but it was enough. Celia dropped the clipboard she was holding and nearly ran out of the room screaming for the attending. They rushed in with wide eyes, fumbling for vitals and tests, while I looked at Celia. She was crying. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered. I wanted to tell her everything right then, but my voice couldn't keep up. I mouthed, "Thank you," and somehow she understood. Over the next few weeks, my recovery became headline news. Billionaire tech visionary wakes from coma. Elias Rowe returns. Rowe Tech founder speaks out. But I wasn't ready to speak, not publicly. Instead, I did what I'd always done best. I strategized. I had a small circle of allies left, 2 loyal former employees and my longtime attorney, Ava Cheng. Ava flew in the moment she heard I was awake. She filled in the gaps I couldn't piece together myself. Darren had declared me mentally incompetent, citing legal precedent and my medical condition. He had maneuvered around my voting shares through a complex web of legal loopholes. The board, lured by the promise of rapid growth and IPO profits, backed him. I didn't just lose the company, I lost the trust I once had in people, but I hadn't lost myself. I spent every waking hour in rehab, pushing past pain, frustration, fatigue. When the therapists told me to slow down, I pushed harder. I'd built $1 billion firm once. I could build something stronger now. But this time, I wasn't just chasing numbers. This time, I had a purpose. Celia visited daily. She didn't ask questions. She brought books, quiet laughter, and moments of peace. I never told her about Darren. Not yet. I didn't want her near the chaos that was coming. One evening, under the sterile hospital lights, she leaned in again, much like she had months before. "You've changed," she said softly. "I remember everything," I whispered. Her eyes widened. "Everything," I nodded. "And I'm not going to let him get away with it." That was the night everything shifted. That was the night I stopped being the patient and became the architect again. You don't realize how heavy the world is until you try to lift it with broken hands. Rebuilding my life wasn't just about getting out of that hospital. It was about rising from the ashes without anyone realizing the phoenix had returned. Left the facility under a new identity, just long enough to vanish from the press and Darren's radar. A private rehabilitation center upstate, funded by an old investment I'd quietly maintained, became my new base of operations. Ava coordinated every move. She remained the only person I trusted completely, besides Celia. But Celia didn't come with me. I couldn't bring her into what was coming next. She didn't deserve to be caught in a war of lawsuits, lies, and legacy. So I left her a letter, explaining nothing, only thanking her. It broke me to leave her behind. But I wasn't Elias the patient anymore. I was Elias Rowe, the man who built an empire, and I had one shot to rebuild it again. I started by revisiting the roots of everything Darren and I had worked on. I knew Rowe Tech's DNA better than anyone. I still had access to an encrypted cloud server we used in the early days, long forgotten by our legal teams and outside investors. In it were blueprints for a technology we never released, something I had been refining in secret. A machine learning neural net that could process rural medical records with predictive diagnostics. Essentially, AI that could help prevent thousands of unnecessary deaths in remote communities. I'd once dreamed of partnering with NGOs to deploy it globally. Darren had called it a passion project with no ROI. But now, I saw its true value. Not just in saving lives, but in creating a rival firm that could take Rowe Tech head-on. I spent months in that cabin refining the code with 2 of my oldest allies, Mara and Jace, former engineers who'd been quietly let go during Darren's aggressive restructuring. We built the prototype with borrowed equipment and long hours, living off ramen and resolve. We named the new company PulseCore. Where Rotech chased profits, PulseCore would chase impact. But impact, I knew, could be monetized if it created trust. We weren't just building tech, we were building redemption. Once we had a working prototype, Ava helped us pitch it to a series of small VC firms, anonymously. We kept my name off every document. In 3 weeks, we had $5 million in seed funding. Within 2 months, we had offers from hospitals in Brazil, Ghana, and Indonesia, all eager to pilot a tool that could reshape rural care. And then came the moment I'd waited for. I went public. Not with a press conference, not with a news article, but with results. I stood on the TEDx stage in Berlin, slim, scarred, and sharper than ever, and unveiled PulseCore to the world. I didn't mention Darren. I didn't need to. I talked about my coma, my awakening, and how the silence taught me that true innovation isn't about noise, it's about need. The response was explosive. Investors pivoted. Partners withdrew from Rotech contracts. And Darren? He showed up at my hotel the next day. "I thought you were dead," he said. I looked him in the eye, steady and calm. "You thought wrong." He tried to buy me out. Tried to settle. Even threatened to bury PulseCore with litigation. But I had one thing he didn't. Authenticity. I hadn't just built a product. I'd built purpose. And the world could feel it. By the end of the fiscal year, PulseCore was valued at $480 million. By the next, we were projected to cross $1.2 billion. But money wasn't the goal anymore. Legacy was, and legacy meant one thing: I had unfinished business with the person who first helped me remember who I was. I had to find Celia. I hadn't seen her in over a year. A full year since that night she whispered to a comatose man, not knowing he was awake, or who he truly was. Celia, the woman who saved my soul before I even knew I'd lost it. I stood outside the hospital where it all began, disguised beneath a baseball cap and simple clothes. My face had been everywhere after PulseCore's global launch, but most people didn't expect billionaires to walk in through the front door without a security detail. I wanted to see her, really see her, before she saw me. When I found her in the nurse's break room, she was leaning over a chart, exhausted but radiant in a way only people who do good in silence are. That quiet strength. It hadn't changed. But I had. I stepped in and cleared my throat. She glanced up with a polite, distracted smile, then froze. The pen slipped from her hand. "Elias?" she said softly. I nodded, fighting back the ocean behind. My ribs. "I came back," I whispered. "Not just to say thank you, but because I realized something." She stood slowly, blinking like she wasn't sure if this was real. "I remembered your voice before I remembered my own name," I said. "You didn't just nurse me back to health. You brought me back. To myself." Her lips trembled. "You disappeared." I had to. There was a war to fight, and I couldn't drag you into it. But every decision I made, every night I stayed, awake building something new, it was because I remembered the way you spoke to me. Like I was still human. Silence wrapped around us. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "I thought I imagined it. That night, when I said I loved you, I thought it was just hope talking." I stepped closer. It was the only thing keeping me alive. Tears ran down her cheeks. Mine, too. We walked outside together beneath the pale morning sun. And for the first time since my world collapsed, I felt whole. Not because of the billions I'd earned back, not because I'd defeated Darren or reclaimed my name, but because I stood beside the one person who had loved me when I had nothing. In the months that followed, I invited Celia to join PulseCore's humanitarian board. She resisted at first, said she was just a nurse. I reminded her that No one was just anything, especially not the woman who reminded a billionaire what really mattered. We didn't fall in love. We chose it. Every day, slowly, through kindness and chaos, laughter and healing. As PulseCore expanded to 40 countries, I made one final move. I bought back controlling shares of Rowe Tech, not to destroy it, but to rebuild it. I merged the two companies, dissolving the toxic legacy Darren left behind, and anchoring the new empire in what we now called the Celia Foundation, an initiative focused on medical technology for underserved communities. Celia never asked for credit, but I made sure the world knew. Her story mattered just as much as mine. So if you're watching this, wondering how someone becomes a billionaire or rises after losing everything, let me tell you, it's not about the numbers. It's not about the exits or the Forbes list or the shiny titles. It's about the voice that believes in you when you no longer do. Sometimes that voice whispers when the world goes quiet, and that whisper becomes your reason to rise.